Hi and welcome back to another video from Effective Dashboards. In this video we're going to focus on a DAX function, and that DAX function is going to be called UseRelationship. Now this function is going to be used in with some dates. Okay, so we're going to use it with some dates, and we're going to use it in such a way that we can show the number of records related to 2 or 3 different dates in the same table. Okay, so just so you know the sort of what we're trying to achieve here, we're going to talk about root cause analysis records. Okay, so each one of these is an event, and something's happened, and we've had to carry out a root cause analysis investigation. So just so you can sort of set the scene and understand the data model, because it's really important you understand what's happening here. I'm going to talk you through the process. So there's an event. This is this red star or red explosion type thing here, and that event has got a date. Okay, so something happened on a particular day, and it's a date, and it's stored in a data table. All of these dates are stored in the same table. Okay, so that's important. Now sometimes you can, whether it's an ideal data model is, that could be argued, but that's a data model we've got, and that's what we've got to work with. And I think this is where I'm explaining that you've got to kind of use what you've got. You could potentially go and rejig the data model, but there's no need to if you use this approach. Then we've got a kickoff meeting, so that's when we get a team, assemble a team, and kick off, formally start the root cause analysis investigation, and try and figure out what went wrong to cause the event to happen. At some point there'll be some analysis that's complete, that's got a date. So these are milestone dates that are all stored in the same table, or the same record in the same table. And then we've got the actions that are agreed, and then finally we've got all the actions are completed, and that has mitigated or reduced the likelihood of the root cause analysis happening again in the future. So that's the data model here. So our requirement is to actually go and create a report that shows the number of events historically that have gone through this sequence here, okay, each month and each year. So I'll just switch over to the actual final outcome before we go and actually build it ourselves. So what we've got is we've got a matrix here, and then for each year and for each month, let's go into 2019, 2020. We want to go and say, okay, in January, how many work order or how many root cause analysis events kicked off? So we had one kicked off. How many had the analysis complete? How many had the actions defined? How many had the actions fully mitigated? Now these will not all be the same event. These will be different events that were maybe initiated in 2019 or perhaps before that. But really this is the requirement here, is to see the level of activity. So in a given month, in a given year, how much work are we moving through this whole process? Okay, so I think that has set the scene. So we will go and open up a blank Power BI dashboard, and we will crack on. Okay, so here is the data model we've got here, and it's a pretty straightforward data model. We've got a dates table. Now most models should have a dates table. I highly recommend it. I'll leave a link below to a video which I've got that explains how to create a dates table, why it's important. It's really straightforward to go and create one of these. So we've got a dates table here, and we've got a relationship between the date and the event date. Okay, so most of the time we're going to be looking at creating a relationship between the date and how many work orders were, or how many root cause analysis events were actually created on that date. That's going to be the most common relationship. Okay, so I'm back in the report view here, and I'm just going to quickly create a report here and explain what happens when we just create a normal report to count the number of events at each status. So let's go for year, and let's go for month name. That's been the two, it's been the rows. The columns, let's go for status here, so we can minimize the dates and we can go for the RCA status. So here's all the different status codes that are available for an RCA. And then we've got an event, RCA event count. So this is the number of events. And let's go and add that as the values. So what this is going to show, now these Before I mention this, these are not in order. Okay, so I'd probably put these, or definitely put these in the order of the actual sequence they flow through, the milestones they flow through as part of the actual RCA event process. However, what I want to just show here is that these are the number of RCA events and their status, but it's only showing the RCA events that were created in each one of these months and years. Okay, so if I take 2020 for example, in February, of all the RCAs that were created in February, because remember that's the link that we've got here into this one here, we'll cover this in a second. We've got 3 of them which were complete, we've got 1 which was waiting analysis, we've got 1 which is waiting completion. 5 in total. So that's actually telling us that there were 5 RCA events were happened or created in February, and that's the current status of these events. Okay, so that's useful information if you want to see what the kind of current status of the events that were perhaps created closer to time are. So say, for example, we want to say, okay, well in 2020, what's happened to the events that were created in 2020? And we can see that we've got 1 which is waiting for recommendations, and 1 which was created in, the 1 which was created in February is waiting for recommendations, the 1 which was created in March is waiting for analysis. So that's useful. However, that's not what we want. Okay, so I just want to show you what happens if you just use a normal relationship. Okay, the active relationship. Okay, so I'm back now in the relationship view, or the modeling view, and we can see here's our active relationship here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create additional relationships between this date here, because remember we need one common axis, which is going to be this date provided by the date table. So I'm going to create a common axis, and I'm going to create a relationship to each of the other milestone dates in the RCA table. So the kickoff meeting, the analysis complete, the recommendations issued, and the actions agreed, and finally the actions complete. So I'm going to create a relationship between each one of those. So let's go for the first one, which is the kickoff meeting, and we can see here it's got this dotted line. Now I did go into this in the prior video, but we'll cover that again. So we've got here this meeting kickoff. Now this doesn't have a date in it just now, it's null, but there is a relationship here between this kickoff meeting date and the date that's in the date table, this standard range of dates that's going to cover every day between the start and end date that I've got in this date table. Now if I try and activate this relationship, it's saying you can't do it basically, because you need to have only one active relationship between 2 tables. Okay, so you're not going to be able to do it. So it's saying, well, you need to inactivate the other relationship basically if you want to activate this one. So we don't want to do that. We're happy with the default relationship, so we'll cancel that. But what we have done is we've told the model, the data model, that there is a connection there. There is a relationship that's available, and we can use a measure, and we can use relationship to activate that within a particular for a short period of time, just so we can calculate, carry out a calculation. Okay, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So before we move on and do that, I'm just going to create the relationships between the other dates in this table here. Okay, so we've now got quite a few, we've now got 5 relationships here, 1 active and 4 inactive relationships. So let's go back here, and I'm going to remove that for just now, just for clarity, and I'm going to create a new measure. And this is where we're going to use the use relationships. So this one is going to be, what we'll call this, kickoff meeting count. And we're going to use that calculate, because we're changing the filter context. So remember, the standard filter context is going to use the active relationship, so it's going to filter the count based on the count of the number of records in the RCA account, the RCA count event, which is this measure here. The standard measure is going to count it based on the event date. We want this one here to count it, or count the number of rows based on the kickoff date. So we are going to calculate, and the expression is going to be this count, RCA event count. However, rather than use the default relationship, we're going to change it to use relationship. So we're going to explicitly tell it to use a different relationship. And because we've already informed through the modeling tab, we've already informed the model, Power BI model, the file here, that there's a dotted line, that there's a relationship, even though it's not active. We want to activate it. Now you need to be able to, you need to have that dotted line to be able to activate the relationship. You need to tell it that there's a relationship there, even though it isn't the active one. So it's going to be between dates, and it's going to be between the kickoff meeting date there. Okay, so that's the relationship we're going to use to count the number of events. And then we're going to close that off, and then we're going to click on the tick here. And then I'm going to go and we're going to stick that into a matrix. Okay, so let's add in a matrix here, and let's add in the year as the row, and we'll add in the month name, and then for the columns we're going to leave that blank for just now, and I'm going to add in first of all just the normal event count, and that's going to essentially be the number of events that were created. And then we're going to kick off the stick in the measure we created, kickoff meeting count. Okay, so in 2015 we can see that we're starting to see some different values here. Or let's take it into 2020 here. We can see that we had 14 events that were actually created, and we had 13 kickoff meetings, which you would expect because the kickoff meetings are going to be happening pretty close to when they actually were actually created. In January we had one kickoff meeting. On February we had one event. There were 5 events, sorry, and 2 kickoff meetings, etc., etc. So this is just made up data, so it might not always be that obvious. So the key thing here is this is calculating the number of events that were actually created in that month, and this is counting the number of events that had a kickoff meeting, that completion date, that fell within that month. Okay, so there's a subtle difference, not a subtle difference, there's a real difference between the two. They're completely different. So I'm going to add in the measures for the other ones, and I'm going to pause this for just now, and we'll come back and we'll discuss that in a second. Okay, so I've now gone in and created the measures for each one of these different dates. Okay, so each one has got exactly the same pattern. I've used calculate to change the filter context, and then we've counted the number of rows in the table, but we've counted the rows using the relationship between the date, and this one here, for example, would be analysis complete date, okay, rather than the event create date. Now that has then allowed us to pull those into this matrix here, and we've got a 2-level matrix. We've got the date, which is year and month, and if I want to go and look at, say, 2021, we can see that in January we had no events kicking off, we had no kickoff meetings, we had one event that had met the analysis complete milestone, and we had 2 events that had the actions defined, and we had 1 event that had all the actions complete. And that is allowing us to see the level of activity which has taken place as the events travel through or progress through each one of these status codes. Okay, so this is an example. It's normally you would have a separate status table with a date and a status to tell you where the when each of the events progress to each of those status codes. But if you do have a data model similar to this one here, where the dates are stored within the same record in the same row, then this is a way that you can start to look at how work is progressing through the process. So thanks for listening. Hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you found this to be an example, if you're from maintenance and reliability, something that you could apply, and is a little bit more attuned to something we'd come across in that particular domain. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, please. That's always appreciated. If you want to keep up to date with the latest videos that I release, I try to release one every week. Not always the case, but yeah, try to get one out every week, then subscribe, and then you can be kept up to date. Apart from that, thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video.